All right, let's dive into a fantasy focus. We're talking NFL quarterbacks on this first section of our fantasy quarterback tiers list. Now, we don't have official tiers. We're kind of going by the seat of our pants here. We're trying to figure out where things are at, who we like, who we don't like, kind of how our tiers separate. And we're going to give you some insights on who to look out for when it comes to drafting your fantasy teams, your fantasy work league, your school league, whatever you got, whether it's here at the ActionLab Sports, which we do have our own fantasy leagues. So we'll be sharing that information. Join our Discord if you haven't already. ! Discord in the chat. But we're talking some quarterbacks and we're talking wide receivers tonight, but we're starting with quarterbacks. And we're starting with some of the tiers. Now, we've already talked about some of these tiers previously on this show. Well, we've hinted at some of these because there's been players that we've liked, and there's been some, we've covered a couple other segments. Kirk Cousins, says Joker. Yeah, he's probably somewhere on these lists. He was all over. He was looking great in the quarterback
I
Netflix
enjoyed
special.
him a lot. I
thought he was good. I thought he was good.
More so than I would have thought. Would have enjoyed him.
100%.
I'm a Kirk fan now.
Yeah, I think hopefully primetime Kirk is who we think he is, and we're not going to let him off the hook.
I was waiting for it.
All right, guys. Let's talk about the tier ones. Let's dive into it. Let's see who we have here. And for me, Scotty, I think there's only 3 dudes in this list.
Cooper.
Okay.
Ban wreck.
Well, now you're banned.
You're banned, wreck. That's it. You're done.
The only one Cooper is in front of is probably Kenny Pickett.
Ballhands is also at number 1.
All right, it's so the top 3 QBs. Again, I talked about this previously when it's our trends of getting a good quarterback is like a good night of sleep. I've associated that so far in our trends. For a fact these guys are going to get you 23 points minimum every week. You don't have to worry about it. And that's Josh Allen, Mahomes, and Hurts in no particular order. I haven't. This is tier
because you said it in the wrong order. But that's fine.
Those are tier 1. These are guys that you pay a premium. I don't know, WD Kong. Where did you get those emotes?
Those are some solid emotes.
I don't like those.
Is that Kadarius Toney?
Get out of here.
No,
that's Mahomes, and then is that? Oh,
that's also Mahomes.
It looked like a 19 almost, and I was like, "Is that Toney?" But it's
you're blind.
It's really small on my screen.
These guys. Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes, you pay a premium price for these guys. I mean, these guys are the guys that you will draft early on and feel really good about your decision about making these happen. I mean, they've averaged 25 points at least, these 3 quarterbacks last year. Average flex, again, I put this up there last time as well, puts up 7 to 8 points. So, when you're getting quarterbacks that are outside of these top 3 that are putting up 18, 19 points, you're almost getting a flex extra within one position every single week. So it's why not go for one of these guys early on in your draft? Keep these guys in mind, and these are guys you reach for. These are guys you feel fantastic about. I don't think there's anybody else when you're looking at the rest of these quarterbacks. I mean, I think the second tier, you're looking at the Burrows, the Mahomes. I mean, the Burrows, the Lamar Jacksons, Justin Fields kind of world of what they were able to do with they're kind of in that second tier flux of using your feet, using your arm. But, however, is there anybody that breaks in this tier 1 outside of those 3?
Listen, you know how I feel about Lamar as a quarterback lead a team to a Super Bowl. As a fantasy quarterback, let's keep in mind Lamar's MVP year several years back, I think might have been the best fantasy season for a quarterback that's ever occurred.
Oh, he's a running back and
total points that year. I'm not kidding when I say that. I think it might have been the highest point total for a QB in a single season in fantasy history. So does Lamar Jackson have upside? Of course, I think teams have figured him out, especially in the passing game a little bit. And obviously, we've run into some injury concerns. Justin Fields, I'm glad that who was it in here?
Joker
was like, there's too much hype on Fields. I totally agree. Like,
Yeah.
listen, even as a fantasy quarterback, there's too much hype. There's too much hype on him as a quarterback, because I believe the Bears originally had the number 1 pick this year for a reason. Listen, Justin Fields might still be all right, but like, you can't be elite and be on the worst team in football. And let me run through Justin Fields' point total last year at quarterback, because he finished as QB6 in the NFL. But you're like, with these other guys, you're like, you're getting consistent 23 a week, right? Justin Fields, 14.6, 9.8, 6.9, 10.2, 17, 19.4, 24.4, 26, 42.7, 40.4. So you're like, he's figured it out. Then he goes 23.6, 21.3, 23.6, 9.9, and 17.2. Like, that 23 point threshold you were talking about, he
teases you
5 times all season. So like, he's very boomer bust. I don't want a boomer bust quarterback. I want a quarterback that I know I'm going to get consistent points from. So I'm not drafting Justin Fields this year. It's not a guy.
And you're always you like the boomer bust. You do.
I like the boomer bust with the upside, but like, he's going into year 3. Yeah, they added DJ Moore, improved the offensive line, so he might be better. But if he's better, I still don't know. He's better.
I mean,
at winning football games, he's not better. I don't think. Not to mention, like, I don't think Chicago wants him running around as much as he did last year. And with how much he runs, he's injury prone. I mean,
true.
He's not that he is injury prone. He hasn't proven to be that. But like, you can only take so many hits. We've said that with Lamar, and everyone's like, no, he keeps going. And then all of a sudden, the last 2 years, Lamar's been very hurt.
Now,
so would you put Herbert over Fields? I'd take Herbert over Fields.
So, and that's
in real life.
Well, that's what I was so that's where I'm separating out, like, maybe my tier 2, right? So like, I think the Joe Burrows and the Lamar Jacksons are more on the top end of the tier 2 towards tier 1 versus like the bottom end, where I think Justin Fields kind of like, I mean, maybe Justin Fields separates out. So yeah, the Trevor Lawrences, the Justin Herberts of the world, where it's like, and even still, I think like Trevor Lawrence has a little bit higher of a ceiling this year than I think he typically has had so far. So like, maybe Justin Fields kind of drops that tier 3, and we have like a Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert number 2 tier. Because like, I originally had Justin Herbert at number 3, but like, that's based off of the fact that he had great years in like 2021. He was quarterback 2 in fantasy, 23 fantasy points a game. Now he has, and again, the upside of Justin Herbert is he has Kellen Moore. He's got a first-round pick, Quentin Johnson. He's got Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. He's got Eckler. He's got a lot of options. So now I think Herbert, if he stays healthy, I think Herbert maybe elevates to that tier 2.
Herbert last year was QB. Hold on. I just messed it up. I was right there. He was QB 11. And let's keep in mind, he was hurt for most of the year with something rib related, whatever that was, when he got hurt. I think that was like, it was early on against the Chiefs.
Yeah, I was going to say, wasn't it week 2 against KC?
It was week 2, actually, because that was the first Amazon game on Thursday night. Yep.
Yeah.
So he was hurt most of the year. You had Mike Williams and Keenan Allen hurt for good chunks of the year, which could happen again because those players have proven to do that. But they did add Quentin Johnson. You had, like you talked about, you have the new Kellen Moore. So like, I like, even as QB 11 to Justin Fields, who was QB 6. Justin Fields had 307 points last year. Justin Herbert was at 280.7. So they were separated by 27 points off of. And a lot more, I think, went right for Fields, frankly, as far as fantasy was, than it did for Herbert. And Fields didn't have a ton to work with, but I'm not sure he has a ton to work with this year either.
Whereas, given the fact that he didn't have a ton to work with, he finished 5th on average fantasy points per game among quarterbacks in 2022. He did so while putting up deep, mediocre passing numbers, like 100.
It was boomer bust.
It was boomer bust. So it's like, it's kind of,
if he broke off a long run, he was going to give you a ton of points. If he didn't, he wasn't going to be an average quarterback for you.
Now he will be between top tier tier 2 and tier 3. I mean, he's going to be, I feel like, a borderline top 10 quarterback fantasy-wise this year.
Last year, there was a clear separation. Last year, in normal leagues, you had Mahomes number 1 at 428 points. You had Allen at 2 with 412. And then Hurts at 384. And Hurts missed a couple games. So average-wise, Hurts might have actually been number 1 last year. Or right there with Mahomes, because he missed, I think, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Injured late in the season. And then you had Burrow at 369. And then after that, it drops all the way to 314. So, like, there was a separation with the top 4. And frankly, if you don't get those top 4, then there's a lot of guys that are kind of, you look at, Gino was 314, Justin was 307, Kirk was 305, Trevor was 303, Daniel Jones was 209 or 294, Goff was 290. Like, there's a ton of guys right in that, 27 points separated between your 5 or 6 and your 12 last year.
I mean, the only other thing that I would say with, like, Herbert's a weird one for me. Like, I think we have Mandalorian Herbert over Fields. Well, the thing that holds Herbert back is the fact that his receivers get hurt every year. When's the last time you saw Mike Williams and Keenan Allen finish a season without any injuries or not missing substantial time over the course of a season? Like I just feel like there's issues there. There's the coaching. There's a few things that, like, even though Herbert's a sexy pick, I mean, you still take him after the Allens, Mahomes, the Jalen Hurts, the Lamar Jacksons, the Joe Burrows. But then, I think now is where you're kind of in that situation where it's like, do you take Herbert? Do you figure out that he is a little bit better with all the situations? Like, he was a top quarterback a couple years back in fantasy, but then you just have these random, like, roulette wheels of who's he throwing to week. Like, that's what scares me with Herbert sometimes.
I don't worry about that this year. He's loaded with talent. He's going to be, and not to mention, they get their elite left tackle, Rashawn Slater, who was out most of last year, back. And let's be honest, they're the Chargers, so they're going to have more injuries this year. That's kind of what the Chargers do, Chris.
WD Kong, Chargers are underachievers. I don't get it. Yeah, that's true. They always underachieve.
Last year, the NFL does their top 100. Prior to last season, the Chargers had 8 guys in the top 100. More than any other team in the league. And then they made the playoffs.
Here we are.
You know who's not had a player thus far as they've got to the top 20, Chris? They've gone like 110 through 21. And I'm pretty sure a Chief has not named. Which means at most the Chiefs are going to have 3 or 4 guys. They'll definitely have 3. They'll definitely have Mahomes, Kelsey, and Chris Jones.
Yeah.
Like, I think Creed Humphrey, if he's not in the top 110, is an absolute dog shit. He's the best center in the league.
I still
and their offensive guard right next to him that they signed big money.
Joe Tooney.
Joe Tooney, maybe the best guard in the league. So, like, those rankings are garbage. But, like, everyone's like, if Mahomes just has so much talent, that's why he wins. If he only has 2 other guys on his team in the top 110 of the league, and he's winning Super Bowls, like, what are we talking about here? But that's off to something totally different, Chris.
Yeah, and
I could do once all those rankings come out, maybe I'll do a coming in hot on that.
I mean, the top 100 is always garbage.
Yeah,
because most of the time it's players putting in, their best friends. The best friends in the rankings.
It's always kind of a weird thing that it always comes to the top of the X. You're looking at you're in X and you're just looking at it.
Like I think Austin Eckler just came out as like 21 or 22 in the league. And don't get me wrong, I like Austin.
But he's you don't
Austin Eckler is, I wouldn't even put him in the top 100 most important players in the league.
Yeah, I think, so taking a look at, all right, let's recap a little bit. So, no one's touching the Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Mahomes tier 1, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow tier 2. I mean, Joe Burrow takes a little step back with the injury, so that you got to keep that into account.
He could flirt.
But
with that tier 1, but with the injury, you got to probably have some caution there.
Correct. And then you have Justin Fields at the bottom end of tier 2, top end of tier 3, along with Justin Herbert. I think Trevor Lawrence takes a step up, I think, this season with, scoring over 4,000 passing yards, 30 total touchdowns. I think he has added, benefits with having Calvin Ridley as an option. I think
sounds like everyone's betting on Calvin Ridley this year.
Everyone loves Calvin Ridley. Yeah, I don't know, but overall, I mean, Trevor Lawrence is that sexy. I think like tier 3 isn't tier 3 that sexy player. Justin Herbert, like Trevor Lawrence. You want them to be good. They're sexy picks. They're big names, but you haven't really seen them like do what some of the top quarterbacks above them have done in the tier 1s and tier 2s. Like maybe it's hard for me to like dive into those sexy tiers. Then you have Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson he's in like a unique tier of his own, isn't he? Like, here's the thing with Deshaun Watson. That's like, you hate to say it because Deshaun Watson sucks. He sucks as a person, but he's awful last season. Awful. So you're banking on him being Deshaun Watson from what he was in Houston, but they have a new offense. They had a new offense last year. They had new teammates. He was rusty. He missed like a year and a half. But in 2019 and 2020, people will forget that he was in number 2 fantasy in 19. He was number 5 quarterback in 2020. Browns have one of the better rosters from that standpoint. He has a blend of passing and rushing. He has more upside than some of the guys behind him in this list, right? He's got more upside than like a Daniel Jones, a Tua, maybe not Tua. Tua's got a lot of weapons, but like some of the guys that maybe fall behind him. I just don't want to root for a guy every week that I don't love. So it's like, it's hard for me. But at the same time, for my fantasy league, I'm like, do you take the upside of like a Deshaun Watson knowing he could be a fantasy factor? I hate it, but I'm like, I mean, Tyreek Hill's a bad person, but we still draft him in the top 15, right?
Yeah, one's proven to be recently good. Deshaun Watson, when you said he was awful when he came back last year,
bad.
that might have been an understatement.
No, he was bad.
He was awful, Chris.
He was like almost bottom. He was 30.
The only clip I've seen from Cleveland's camp was when there was a fight that broke out on a play where Myles Garrett made a 6-spin move. That was really impressive. 2, Deshaun Watson made one of the worst throws I've ever seen that should have been picked by the linebacker but wasn't. And then 3, there was like a fight that broke out after. So that's the only I don't trust Deshaun Watson at all. I wouldn't touch Deshaun Watson for varying reasons. But
it's almost like a rookie where you don't draft him, but you keep track of him to see if he does anything.
Kind of.
I mean, he's probably going to be he's probably not going to be a free agent because people believe in that upside that he could get back to being the number 2 overall fantasy QB. I just don't know if I see that with.
I mean, that was 3 years ago, right? Like, it's like,
yeah,
basically,
damn it, Benny,
nothing. And if you touch him, he'll get idea. Well, that was what I was trying to get at when I'm like, I won't touch him for varying reasons, but thank you, Cuban.
He wants you to touch him.
Yeah, I'm not gonna touch him. Chris, again, if you're not taking like a top 7-8 guy, you just wait on Geno Smith, who was number 5 overall fantasy points last year, and he's like going average like 13, 14 overall at the quarterback position.
Yeah. I mean, Geno highlights the next tier, right? The next tier is like a ton of guys. Like, I think here is where you get to like the boring guys that are productive that don't necessarily get you excited. Like, it's kind of like
mid-white quarterbacks.
Kind of like going home. It's like going home to your wife, right? It's like
Tua.
No.
Has
this is
here.
Dak, Tua, Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith, Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff. Like, these are guys. Maybe Anthony Richardson, I think, drops to like tier 6, maybe.
He's getting drafted too high.
He's getting drafted way too high, in my opinion.
And I love Anthony Richardson, but I don't think he's going to be reliable.
They'll use his legs, but I think he's going to get hurt or something. Like, you gamble.
Terrible.
Best case scenario, he's kind of like Justin Fields with some boom games with a lot of bust games.
Yeah, if you're relying for Anthony Richardson as your number one or number, I think these guys in this tier are like guys you pair with a bench quarterback and play matchups, right?
Like,
so,
Chris, I learned the hard way last year. One of my fantasy teams in one of our leagues, I took Trey Lance as my starter.
Yeah,
so it didn't go good. Didn't go great for me.
So yeah, like I said, Dak, Daniel Jones, Tua, Kirk, Geno. I think Geno's one of the highest upsides of this group here. Dak is kind of up there as well. I think there's a lot of weapons in Dallas. They're going to have a change with the offensive scheme there with Kellen Moore going to the Chargers. So we'll see what that looks like. But I still don't love the coach. I don't love the coach there. So that makes me hesitate on Dak a little bit. Daniel Jones, I'm not convinced. Like a lot of the Saquon stuff is kind of like, I don't know. They'll use him and stuff, but I just don't feel great. Daniel Jones used his legs at the end of last season, but Tua has a lot of weapons. I feel like the issue with Tua is the fact that you're throwing your chips in on a guy that you don't know is going to make it through a season. Like that's the issue with Tua is one concussion, he might miss half the season, like based off of his history
or the rest of his career.
So Tua's an issue. Kirk Cousins, I think, has some value. Obviously, you have Justin Jefferson. There's a lot of,
Kirk Cousins. I mean, it sounds basic to say, but he's very safe play.
He's safe. He's
Jared
a
Goff,
high floor,
Aaron
low
Rodgers
ceiling.
Likely, those are like three guys that might throw for a decent amount of yards, get some touchdowns, but they offer almost nothing in the run game whatsoever. Which, when you're talking fantasy, is not ideal. That's why maybe guys that Deshaun or Dak or Daniel Jones, even Daniel Jones actually does offer a lot of run game potential.
Which is why
I think people don't realize that about Daniel Jones.
Yeah,
but like he's actually a pretty good runner of the ball.
He's gotten better at that. I mean,
he's not elusive, but he's fast. Daniel Jones is fast.
But I do think
he's the top 5 fastest quarterback in the league.
I mean, he's an athletic dude.
I'll guarantee that right now, actually.
Guarantee. So I think like these guys that we're talking about here, maybe you pair with a backup and play matchups periodically throughout the season at some level. It's not like you're getting a top 2 or 3 tier guy where you're starting every week and then you're plugging in one bye week. However, these guys I think you can rely on for like 2/3 of your season. Then you pair him with like a Brock Purdy or a Matt Stafford or a Derek Carr, down the stretch of your draft and try to figure out ways to kind of get there, which leads us to our next tier of, quarterbacks. I think you're getting into the Staffords, the Wilsons, the Carrs, the Pickett's, the Purdys, and the Kyler Murrays. Kyler Murray still has value, even though they have the lowest win total.
Those are called bye week starters.
These are guys that if you're starting week to week, you're in trouble. You're not in a good shape. Derek Carr and Kenny Pickett. As much as I don't want to give Rex Boy some love, I think Carr and Pickett are the only two that I would say slightly have a little bit higher of a ceiling here. But you're not feeling good about starting like those two guys over some of the guys we've already talked about.
You were excited about Pickett throwing like 5 touchdowns and like 12 starts last year.
Like Pickett,
that excites you from a fantasy perspective.
Pickett is just like he got better as the season went on, but it's like, again, you don't want to rely on him as your main fantasy option. He's not going to Rec, prove me. What do you expect out of Kenny Pickett?
Is that like, again, I'm not expecting elite stuff, but fantasy wise, he's going to be a mid-tier quarterback. He can use his legs. He does have running potential.
Keep in mind, most leagues are 12-team leagues. So is he a starter in fantasy football?
On a 12-team league, no, because like I said, I only have him as a top 20 quarterback. As a backup option, he's probably not a bad one, but again, like that's a guy that you'd probably take a flyer on in the late rounds. But that's a guy you'd probably draft. You draft him as a backup and keep him around to see if he can get better. Especially with the weapons he's surrounded with now.
I mean, he has Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Allen Robinson, Pat Freiermuth. Like, he has options. It's just...
Yeah, Darnell Washington now.
So like they have options there, but it's just like, I don't know, you don't get excited about it. My boy Russ is in this group. I can't get excited about him, especially after the receiving core issues they've just recently had a hit on. So it's like I can't really vouch for him as being a fantasy streamer for this particular season. I just don't love him. Matt Stafford's coming off the injury last season, so I think he'll be better. I'm buying stock low. He's like, I buy stock low on the Rams, right? If he's healthy coming into a season, now he takes a hit with Cooper Kupp. So it's like every single one of these guys has some caveat of like, all right, they're great, but Brock Purdy, I mean, they've gone through four quarterbacks a year for the last 2 years, practically. It's like they're always, that's always a mix up with whether or not they're going to have healthy quarterbacks in San Francisco. Of this tier 6, I think Derek Carr in the bad division seems to be one of the interesting plays.
Again, I stopped listening because I'm like, we're talking about guys that you should only start on bye weeks. None of these guys have the upside of a top 12, in my opinion. Like maybe, I don't know who you mentioned, like Rodgers, Goff, certainly have the upside of the top 12. But
yeah, Rodgers, Goffs are a little higher tier,
like,
but
I just
like
Stafford, Carr, Pickett,
Murray,
Purdy.
I'm trying to think of other guys in there.
If Murray does play, if Murray is the starter to begin the season, he's probably not using his legs much since he just came off of ACL surgery.
True.
He's definitely not going to start. Murray's a guy you like maybe pick up a few weeks in and stash because then no one drafts him because he's not going to be ready to go at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
And then hope for an upside potential, but
and
again,
then who's
his upside is his running, and coming off that ACL, he's not going to run much, I would imagine.
Yeah.
He's running to Hollywood Brown and Zach Ertz in his 37th year. And the good old CSU tight end they drafted in the second round last year.
I mean, I agree with you on the tight ends if the Cardinals ever actually use them. If they use the tight ends like the Falcons use Kyle Pitts, they don't.
Joker loves Trevor Lawrence. Gino, because of his contracts, is wreck. No love for Rodgers. Rodgers, I think is. I don't hate Rodgers.
He's like, his upside is he has to throw for. Listen, the Jets defense is going to be very good, so they're not going to have to like throw the ball up and down the field to score. You're holding out hope with Rodgers that he throws a lot of touchdowns. It's nothing against Rodgers, the player. It's like fantasy wise, he's not going to run the ball, and he's not going to throw for a ton of yards. If he averages 250 yards passing and throws for 2 touchdowns a game, that's simply just, ironically, in this day and age, with no rushing yards, it's not good enough. It's not good enough.
Yeah, 100%.
I also kind of see
it might help him win game. It'll help him win games probably, but from a fantasy perspective, I don't think Rodgers has a high upside. Honestly,
I
think there's a player I love that he's going to be throwing the ball to.
Yeah, Wilson.
We'll get to in a second.
We'll get to that here in a minute. But all right, so long story short, if you don't got one of the top like 8 guys, have fun sweating it from week to week. There you go.
Only thing keeping Russ from being tier 1 is his 3rd and 4th string wide receivers are injured, and just his general ability to play quarterback at this point.
He was
he can run.
He was putting some zip on the ball out there.
Can he run? Can he run anymore?
Maybe.
I don't know if he can.
He's in shape this year, so there's that.
Yeah, he's in the best shape. Of
He's
his life.
moving a little bit better this year than he was last year. So there's that.
Yeah.